So, I'm Jason Michael Perry. I like to say I'm the man with three first names. As I just mentioned, I'm a fractional chief AI officer, and I'm working with a lot of companies to help them figure out how to use AI in the best ways. And so today, I figured it'd be a great to start off with the foundations of AI and make sure that everyone kind of understood not only how it works, but also get into how we use data, how we feed these AI systems so that we can know how we can use them. And then end with a little bit about what's possible and what's coming in terms of AI in the future. Now, few things. As BJ just mentioned, I just wrapped up a book, AI Evolution. It is so fresh that I'm hoping that that 50 copies that are coming, and they're supposed to be here today. Fingers crossed that they make it in time, but they will be here for some of you all. So super excited about it. Just wrapped it up, and my goodness, writing a book is a lot of work. One of the events that I'm really proud of is an event called AI in A minor. I work with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra to compose original music in the form of Mozart as well as Philip Glass. And then we brought out the symphony to play this music, and it was an amazing experience. We played the original pieces of music from Mozart and then played the AI-generated versions. And to hear the difference really gave you an idea of just how far AI has come and its ability to create something that is new, but also obviously based on something that already exists. What's really fun about this event is that we also created all of the artwork for the event using AI. And I love these posters. This is, 2-3 years ago now, and so AI is a lot better, than it was then. But the longer you look at these, the weirder they get. Right? And that's what I think is just so amazing, because it kind of speaks to that point in time of where AI was and just gives you an idea of how it's evolved. But keep in mind, none of these people actually exist. So to get started, why is this so important? And I will note there's one date that's wrong here. Microsoft was founded in 1975. But these are the 5 biggest companies in the world based on their valuation today. And none of these companies existed 50 years ago. And that is why this point in AI transformation is so important. Because what this speaks to is the importance of personal computers, which brought Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA into the fold, the importance of the internet and how much this changed us, Amazon, Google, and now we are in one of the, I would say, the 4th revolutions in our lifetimes, right? Personal computers, internet, mobile apps and application, and now we're talking about AI. And it's so transformative that I imagine 50 years from now, when we're looking at this same list, that this list is going to be comprised of a lot of companies that had a start in AI here today. And that's how transformative this is going to be. Now, one of the best quotes that I think speaks to why conferences like this is important is one from NVIDIA's CEO. As he says, while some worry that AI may take your jobs, someone who's an expert with AI will. And I love to just say, instead of your job, just say your business, right? If you're running a business, if your business is doing something today, keep in mind that there are competitors that are using AI and will continue to use AI that you're going to have to compete with. And if you're not taking advantage of AI today, and your competitors are, you're going to find yourself just like a Sears, who they're not on that top 5 list. So let's get started by just giving the foundation. I like to start by categorizing AI into 2 categories: narrow AI and AGI, or artificial general intelligence. AI has been around for a very long time, and you've been using AI for a very long time. But a lot of that AI that you've used falls in that narrow AI category. That's typing something on your phone and getting autocomplete or suggesting the next word. That's your Netflix recommendations. They're trained on very narrow sets of data. But what makes ChatGPT so different and so amazing is that ChatGPT is an AGI. It's something that understands a lot of different information. And that allows it to answer questions and connect things in ways that we as humans do. Now, there's a thing that OpenAI says is that only their board, up until recently, can determine when they truly achieve the goal of an AGI, a AI that is capable of processing and creating in the way that a human does. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, this might date me, but I think the best way to think about narrow AI versus AGI is Al Bundy. All right? Now, I did a presentation like this to a bunch of high school kids, and they were like, who in the world is Al Bundy? And they thought he was from some other sitcom, which, is not the guy. So if you don't know who he is, just think of someone like Family Guy or, just like that sitcom dad, right? This other guy over here, Gary Kasparov, he at a time was one of the best chess players in the world. He was also the first chess player to be beat by a computer, IBM's Deep Blue. And when we think about chess, when we thought about chess at the time, it was like, oh my goodness, this man must be the most brilliant person in the world. But here's the thing about chess. Chess has finite rules. It's a small problem set. So it's easier to build something like a computer that can play chess than a computer that can do the things that Al Bundy can do. Al Bundy can sit on his couch, look at a TV, and tell the difference between the wall and the television. That's a big deal. He can silence out his kids and focus on the television, right? These are really complicated things that are difficult to do. And when we start talking about artificial general intelligence and some of the things that you may take for granted, that's where the things get the most difficult. Self-driving cars, one of the best examples of implementation of AI. You know what's the hardest thing with the self-driving car? Driving through a parking lot. They're not rules. How fast can you go? How fast should you go? How do you deal with social cues? Those are the things that are complicated, and those are the things that we're talking about when we start looking at artificial general intelligence and the types of rules that we're trying to build with an AI. So as an example, what's the difference between a cat and a dog? Anybody know? Yeah. If you think about the way that kids typically draw pictures of cats and dogs, and you can think about how they're automatically doing pattern recognition, a lot of them focus on the whiskers, right? Cats have whiskers, right? And this is the pattern recognition that you do, and this is the same way that we go about training these AI models. We feed it lots of data, and then we do something called reinforcement learning, where we then go through and we quiz these AI models to see if they actually understand the things that we've given it and that we've trained it. So I have 3 of these slides that are coming up. They're my favorite slides in the world. I'm always like, is 3 too many? But I just can't cut any of them. But just to get you through the idea of training, here's a question. Dogs or bagels? There's a mix in there. Chihuahuas or muffins? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Labradoodles or fried chicken. Mm-hmm. So this is this idea that we train these models by giving them information, and then just like this, we'll quiz them and say, hey, can you tell the difference between these things? And that way we can reinforce it so we can get better at understanding and recognizing the patterns to understand what these things are. Now, I think this is a really important thing because if we go back to that example of understanding the difference between a cat and a dog, a kid drawing whiskers, if you understand what something is, then the next thing is being able to generate something based off of that. Being able to answer a question like, what's missing in the square? Tools in Adobe like generative fill or examples of this exact thing, of understanding something well enough, just like you or I can sit here and say, her nose is missing, and we can figure out what we would fill into that spot because we understand, based on understanding the pattern, what's not there. And we can then begin to create something that is generative AI. Now, we can get a whole lot more technical, but at a very high level, that's what AI is. Now, for most of us, you're not going to create an AI model. You're going to use an AI model. But I'm here to let you know that OpenAI is not the only AI model in town. There are tons of AI models. And all of these AI models are all working towards the same thing, getting to that stage of an AGI. OpenAI defines an AGI as having reached all 5 levels of AI. Based on their definition right now, we're somewhere around here, level 1 and level 2. I think BJ said this in the intro. I like to say it this way. We're in the AOL days of AI. That's how early it is. That's how much it still needs to happen. And even by OpenAI standards, we're just at the very beginning of level 2. Level 1 is what you can think of right now, conversational AI bots. Level 2, these are the ones that we're starting to see now. DeepSeek is an example of this. These are thinking and reasoning AI, things that can start to do problem solving. The next level, we'll talk a lot more about this, is agents or agentic AI. These are systems that can start to do things without a human being in the loop. They just do it by themselves. Then, original creation. Not using information that already exists to replicate, but creating something that's truly new. And then last, organizers. Think of an organizer as a parent running a household. That's an organizer who runs an organization and can look at lots of different things, bring them together, and make sure everything happens. They know to think about the budget. They know what they need to do in terms of schedule. There's a whole lot that has to happen, and they can organize all of that. And at that point is when we feel that we will have accomplished a true AGI based on OpenAI's guidelines. Some companies have different definitions, but this gives you a rough idea. Now, as I mentioned, most of us, we're not going to create an AI model. We're going to work with something like OpenAI's ChatGPT. And the name for these models that we work with is a foundation model. Foundation models are models that have already been pre-trained and have been given a lot of information so they can do specialized tasks. Right? And this is most of the way that all of us will work with these models. But what we can do is we can also take these models and we can customize them so we can fine-tune them with our own custom and unique information. I like to think of a foundation model as like a shrink-wrap graduate, high school, college, that has all of this general knowledge and they're ready to work. But then when they get into whatever job it is, then there's that specialized fine-tuning that may need to happen for your organization. Now, to give you an idea, this is a list of 10 different foundation models that are out there. And I love to show this slide to remind people, ChatGPT is just one of them. There's Google's Gemini, ChatGPT 4o, the O stands for Omni, which is the most common one that a lot of us are using. There's, of course, DeepSeek. I added a slide to talk a little bit about them in a minute. Meta has an open source model called Llama. So if you're using imagine.meta.com or using their AI tools down in Instagram, and that's all based off of their Llama AI model. A group of people from OpenAI left to form a company called Anthropic. It's one of my favorite AI models called Claude. Claude's great. And we can keep going down the list. There's some private companies like A21 Labs that makes a model called Jurassic. Amazon had a model called Titan, and at AWS reInvent in December, they just announced a new model called Nova. Now, I think this is important because there are lots of different foundation models. And increasingly, companies are starting to build these foundation models that are sometimes specialized to certain industries. And you can get these models and start to either fine-tune them or use them in lots of different ways. But it's important to remember, ChatGPT is not the only game in town, and sometimes it's not even the cheapest. And in some cases, there are models that are even more expensive. So you should keep in mind that there is a diversity of options that are available to you. Now, I snuck this DeepSeek slide in because how could we not talk about DeepSeek and AI today, right? So you remember how I told you about the training process? You know, we tell an AI model what's a cat and a dog, and then we do something called reinforcement learning. So the interesting thing about DeepSeek versus all these other AI models that we've worked with is that we usually start by doing a whole lot of teaching first. So if we think about this as a human, if you go to school, you take a class, you study, you read a book. And then you get quizzed on it, that's your reinforcement learning, and that cycle goes over and over again, right? But just like teaching a model what a cat is versus a dog, we always start with that training piece. This is called labeled data, and giving something labeled or annotated data that explains what it is. So the model understands it. Once it understands it, you then quiz on it. on purpose or accidentally, I don't know how it happened, these folks in China discovered that they could skip the actual teaching part and go straight to reinforcement learning. So instead of teaching a model, they just started quizzing it immediately. And what they discovered is that it really sucked in that first quiz, but by 2 or 3, it was starting to reason and figure out the answers without having the information. And so they were able to exponentially get to a model that understood and reasoned faster by forcing it to take quiz without the information, as opposed to the traditional approach, which was study, test, study, test. And that's what the real big difference is. They also discovered in doing that this model was capable of reasoning at a level equal to OpenAI's $200 a month reasoning model that they've released. Now, if you're interested in foundation models, and you really want to know about all the models that are out there, in wonderful technology world terms, one of the best places to start is with a thing called Hugging Face, because, on the internet, we're really great at naming things. It's named after the hugging face emoji, because that's what that's doing, right? It's like hugging its face. Right? Hugging Face is a platform that you should check out, and it is a website where you can see all types of open and available AI models that are all types of different foundation models that are available and do all types of things, right? And so if you wanted to download something like DeepSeek today, and of course this gets a little bit more technical in terms of how you set it up, you would find DeepSeek on Hugging Face. It's a great place to just explore and see a variety of things that are out there. There are models that are specifically built for doing insurance underwriting or legal decisions or all types of things that exist on this platform. Cool beans? Now, one of the most important things when we start looking at these models, if we go back to this idea of a foundation model, is that ChatGPT is taught with a base level of knowledge. It's like that college graduate. But the thing that makes your organization unique is going to be your own data that you bring to the table. Because your data fills in context, and context is important. Should I wear pants next week? I ask this question all the time, right? And when you think about it, there's a little bit of context that's important here, right? What's the weather going to be? Where am I going? Is this Baltimore, North Carolina, New Orleans, right? And so I say this because it's important, not only in terms of how you write a prompt, but also in terms of the data that's needed to make sure that we can answer questions in a way that makes sense. I love this little script of comic strip here because I think this speaks to it, right? Meta or Facebook is known for saying, move fast and break things, and that works great. But in certain contexts, it's a bad idea, like a FedEx driver, right? And so that context is incredibly important. So when we start working with these different AI models, we usually need to give these models data. And this is becoming easier and easier. If you use ChatGPT or Claude, you can drag and drop your files into it. You can give it this context. And it can use this context to better understand your problems, your Excel sheet, your slides, your reports, right? And typically when we look at this, we talk about this data in these 3 different categories. Structured data. Structured data is like a database, but I think one of the easiest ways to think of it is an Excel spreadsheet where you have labeled rows and columns, and so it defines what that data is. It's structured, and you don't have to really ask questions to figure out what it is. You have unstructured data, like an email. An email is complicated because you have to actually reason and understand to figure out what it is. And then you have this other category of semi-structured data. There are parts of it that are labeled, but some of it is ambiguous, so you still have a little bit of reasoning to figure out. What makes AI great is that it can actually understand your unstructured and your semi-structured data, but it really gets that structured data very well. Now, what's important is that we can give it data, and I think this is something that you always have to remember, but data is not always a complete picture of things. If I were to give you my yearly revenue numbers for this year without giving you the last 5 or 10 years, you can make some assumptions, but you're not going to really know how well I'm doing comparatively unless you have that other information. It's not a complete picture, and that can lead to bias or the inability to actually come to a true understanding of what that information means. And so it's important to understand not only do you need data to feed these models, but you need data and you need to make sure that you are providing data that gives a complete picture to answer the question, because that context is important. Now, one of the best things to do is to start to define these large data sets within your organization based on the types of questions that you want to answer. And you want to get this data. A lot of it may be proprietary to your organization. And when I say proprietary, sometimes this is just because this is how your organization operates. And that makes it proprietary and specific to you. And being able to start to look at these different sets of data throughout your organization is one of the best ways that you can make sure that you're ready to take advantage of these different AI tools. Because if you have this foundational model that understands a lot, just like that college kid, they don't know how you do business. And so what you want to start to do is to take those data sets and get them ready so you can start to feed these AI models to make them smarter about the way that your business does things. There's another concept in the data world too with AI. It's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. All right? It sounds really complicated. It's not. What RAG means is that when I ask a question to an AI model, like, should I wear pants, that it can also start to go out and retrieve data real time that can answer those questions. Now, this is important because there are two different ways that we think about data in the AI space. We think about data in terms of fine-tuning or training. This is the data that you may give to a model to teach it. And going back to what we were saying, college kid, here's your training guide for how you do business. We feed that data in. That's pre-training it so it understands things. But then there's data that's more real time. What's the weather today? What's the score of a football game, right? Will it rain? These types of real-time questions allow a model to go out and fetch data so it can pull information in and better respond to a question based on the real-time information it has and then give a clear answer to it. For some of the more complex chatbots that are starting to be created in organizations, say, for example, a customer service chatbot, it may need to get information about a customer, pull that information in, and then use that to change the way that it'll respond. So this is an example. I'm headed to New Orleans next week. Should I bring swimming trunks with me? Right? This is essentially what my pants question always means. Should I bring swimming trunks? All right? And here, it grabbed the weather, pulled that information in, and it uses that to augment its response. And this is a real-time RAG inquiry that allows me to then augment the way that my AI model works by giving it information real time. This is something that ChatGPT 4.0 does a lot now that it didn't do before. Historically, say a year and a half ago, if you asked ChatGPT who won the Super Bowl or what the Super Bowl score was, it had no idea. It only knew things up to a certain amount of time. But today, if you ask it that question, you'll see a little icon that shows it's searching the internet. That's it making a RAG call to get real-time information, pull it in, and then it's injecting that into it to then figure out how to give you an answer based on what's happening right now. Right? You can find that's the case now. If you go and select like ChatGPT 3.5 and ask it about the weather, you'll be like, I don't know. But you ask 4.0, and it's like, I'll go get that for you. Here's another example. This is maybe a little bit more, a better example in terms of business context. What's the status of my support tickets, right? And in this case, this AI model can then go make a call to Jira, Zendesk, or whatever support system you have. Get information real time, pull that in, and then use that information then to respond. And this means that now the context of data allows it to give you something that's specific to you and your organization. And this is where we're starting to see the real power of AI as it starts to evolve with how your business works. Now, these are all text examples, but AI is so powerful that it understands lots of different things. OpenAI released the Vision AI model. It's a piece that sits on top of ChatGPT 4.0, and allows it to look at images, understand what an image is, and provide details back. One of the case studies that I work with Black & Decker is that a lot of times people want parts for their computer, their equipment of whatever sort. You need that one screw and you have no idea what size it is, but you're trying to figure it out. Well, you can take a picture of something, ask it a question, and using these same mechanisms, not only can these AI tools understand what this image is, but it can also use RAG to go and fetch a product catalog and look at all of the images and come back and tell you what this specific thing is, right? Which starts to give you an idea of the power of these AI models and the ways that businesses and organizations can start to use them. And what you should also see here is that, man, your data is important. Yeah? Cool beans? Now, this is all cool, but you know what the thing is that we go to those levels of AI? It's like it can do all these powerful things, but it can't just book you a trip or do these different actions, right? The most recent version, and I think it got crowded out with DeepSeek, OpenAI released this last week, 2 weeks ago, was OpenAI Operator. And this is a new mechanism with OpenAI that allows it to not only answer questions, but it can start to go out, surf the web, and do actions for you, right? And this is that push to get to that agentic AI that's capable of doing things without a human in the loop. So if I ask it a question, find and book me the highest rated one-day tour of Rome on TripAdvisor, it will actually go and show you as it surfs the web, goes to TripAdvisor, does a search, looks through the pages, and will even ask you questions as it needs, like, what's your credit card information? It's fine, it's AI, it won't do anything with that, all right? And it will just go and book all your travel for you, right? This is the place that we're starting to get to, is providing these types of tools that allow these AI bots to then start to take the next step, which is truly agentic AI, of being able to do a task and perform actions for you. And I think this is an amazing place to be because there's so much context. There's always context and questions. If I said, hey, I want you to cater a lunch next week, are there dietary issues? Does someone need a gluten-free meal? There are always things in context that need to be part of that in order to complete a task. And sometimes we forget how complex the things are that we just naturally do within our heads. Right. So I'm going to give a quick demo of some of the things that are possible here. And to do this, I've logged on to platform.openai.com. Platform.openai.com is like the developer section of OpenAI. And it gives you this playground where you can do some interesting and fun things and access some of the more advanced tools. So here in this playground, what I have is this ability to chat. And I'm not going to get too much in detail here, but you can talk to very specific models that you may not have access to otherwise. There are also the ability to set some settings on how these models work. Amazon also has a service similar to this that you can use. That's a playground. It's really fun because it allows you to play with a lot of different foundation models, and it's in a non-technical way if you want to try them out pretty easily. Now, I want to show you guys how you can create an agent or an assistant. And so I'm here in the assistant section. I'm going to create a new assistant. And I always create this assistant in my some of my workshops. I call her Madam Claudette. So let me double click on this so I can zoom in. So Madam Claudette, I'm from New Orleans, so I had to go with the Bayou Oracle. You know, that's what she is. She's a fortune teller. And this right here is what's called a instruction set. It's plain English. If you're a writer, you should have fun with this. You are defining who this assistant is. And in this case, I've given her a name, Madam Claudette. I told her she was 47. She's a mystic fortune teller. I've also given her some rules. Apparently, I can't spell suggested. But I've also given her some rules on how she should respond. You know, And you can just think about this as just saying exactly what the details are and how something happens. Now, I'm going to just let you know something that's a little bit of a secret here. This is the exact same thing as creating a custom GPT on OpenAI. Exact same thing. All you're doing is you're creating an instruction set. And again, have fun with it. Define the personality. You can say how it should respond. If it's curt, if it's blunt, you can even tell it to always tell you that you're the most magnificent person in the world. You know, on a bad day, sometimes that's good. It helps you out. So I'm going to take this instruction set. And so where it says system instructions, I'm going to give it here. And we get some options, such as file search and code interpreter. So what these things will do is functions here allows you to do RAG calls. Functions would allow you to go find what's called an API or some system that you want to talk to. And you can tell it, call this system to ask for information real time. We can also do something called file search, which allows you to pre-train this model by giving it data about you or your organization. So what I have here are some PDFs, book about horoscopes, an introduction to astrology, and one of my favorite books in the world, I have this one at home, The Power of Birthdays, right? And it tells you for your particular birthday everything about you. So I'm going to take these files, give them to Madame Claudette. So now I'm pre-training her to give her this information. And I could also have RAG, real-time information, that we could use for her to go and fetch information. So I'm going to attach these files, turn this on. I think we also want these for the code interpreter. And so now these are part of her. All right, so I need a name and a birthday. It's up to you if you want to provide year. All right. So I'm going to ask her. Let's see what we get back. And you could already feel that that New Orleans-ness in that response, right? Hello there, Cher. So Austin shares his special day with folks like Eminem and Alan Jackson. So I'm assuming you're going to rap for us later. Libra, according to the Chinese zodiac, it's guessing your year born. But if you were born in 2024, you'd be a dragon. I mean, you're a youngin'. And so it goes on. Here are your lucky numbers in your music. But this right here is an example of an assistant. And this assistant is a fun example, but there are also some more businessy examples that may make more sense for your organization. So for the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, I created an AI assistant. That's Claudette. Go back to Amelia. And so in this case, this is Amelia. Obviously, Amelia Earhart is the idea, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. And Amelia is an assistant that is the AOPA's chief marketing officer. She's a CMO. She knows about marketing. She knows about the organization. And in this case, she has the advertising and media kit for the AOPA. She has access to information about the AOPA. And let me just look at these documents real quick just so you can see a look at these different files here. So here's the 2023 marketing matrix. You know, this is some information from the website, the Wikipedia page. She has their media guide. She has a book on KPIs, a book on creative thinking. And I already have this assistant, Amelia here. And if we look, you can see Amelia has those books and things attached to it. So I'm going to tell her I need a marketing plan for client advertising Bose headphones with a $50K monthly budget and an email pitching the client with KPIs. So she's going to go through and give me information about the target audience. She knows about the channels and tactics, sponsorship content, event sponsorships, video marketing. This is all what she knows from the media kit. She's giving me suggestions on the budget allocation. And she's also giving me suggestions on the KPIs and writing an email pitch, right? And this is the power of the general college student, that is that ChatGPT 4.0, but then we're taking and leveraging our data to pre-train it, to give information about what we can do, which then starts to create an assistant that is capable of doing a lot of things for us. And we can continue to go further and start adding RAG and additional data to make this even more powerful. But this is all what you can do now by creating a GPT in the pro interface, if you're like a paying $20 a month user of ChatGPT, or on the developer side by creating an assistant that you can then start to customize and give these different abilities to. All right. I got one or two other things, but I think this might be a good place to pause for questions, in case anybody has anything they want to ask. Yes? So the developer side allows you to create an assistant, and it gives you a few more options than what you can get as a monthly paid ChatGPT member. You can still do this. It's called creating a GPT on that side. And when you create a GPT, it's a simple interface. You give it a system instruction set. You can give it files that you want to provide to it, PDFs, Excel sheets, slides, whatever you want that ChatGPT understands, and it will work the exact same way. I do believe you have to at least pay I think it's $20 a month to get access to those features.
Hold on 1 second. Let's get the microphone so everybody can hear.
Oh,
there
yes.
I just have a question. When an AI, let's say they're going to be talking in the future,
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to be talking to each other. How will AI recognize it's actually AI?
I don't know if it will be able to recognize that it's AI. There's some funny examples that are already like YouTube examples. If you have ChatGPT, there's their advanced voice feature, which is amazing. And their advanced voice feature allows you to do these things right now. One person took two phones, put them next to each other, and let the two have a conversation, and they ended up singing and doing all kinds of things, and egging each other on. So I don't know if they really will. There was an interview that I thought was very interesting with the former, now CEO of Bumble, where she suggested that the future of dating would be that an AI gets to know you really well and goes out and dates for you, and then comes back and gives you a pairing. And so, who knows what this looks like?
This was kind of a two-part question, too. Now I've lost my train of thought, but it was basically saying that if they're talking to each other, is there some sort of level of security, like blockchaining, where it's derived from, and will that be the security issues of AI?
I think that it's important to understand the difference between pre-training and RAG type operations, because it helps to start to set that separation in terms of what information is secure and what information is not. If you are a healthcare provider, I would highly recommend that you do not, maybe I shouldn't have said recommend and then do not take all of your customer data and upload it into an AI model to train it, because then all of that private information becomes part of that AI model. Right? So you want to make sure that you're keeping in mind what kind of secure information that you're uploading into it. What's beneficial for RAG is that an AI model can ask you a question like, what is your customer ID number, what's your email address, and then go fetch that information and only use it in the context of that conversation. And that's a much more secure way, where it can still have private information, but only in the context of a particular conversation, and it's gone, not used to train the model. And so there is some kind of separation that I think needs to be there. If we're talking about like the question that you originally asked of two AIs talking to each other, they would, in theory, have access to what's been trained, information from training, but not your email address unless you give it to them or you can answer that question. Any others? All right. So when we start to talk about where we are in the future, the big word that everybody's talking about is agentic. And agentic AI is a lot about creating these assistants, but connecting these assistants that we create with the functionality and the features like the operator that we saw with OpenAI. And that will give it the ability to perform actions, do things, and do tasks. So one of the greatest examples I think of this is this tool called Copilot Studio. This is on Azure. And Copilot Studio, if you don't know, Microsoft owns Azure and Copilot Studio. And Microsoft also uses OpenAI's models, so ChatGPT 4.0, for example. What they allow you to do is create custom agents or assistants, just like we did with OpenAI's assistant, but you can then connect these with these different data sets or use these different agent templates so that you can have an agent that can read your email. You can very easily use Copilot to create an agent that looks at an email box, say a support email box, reads those emails, and responds to those emails as the first line of defense. And that's something that is very much just a few clicks to create. And you can then start to customize that by giving these assistants or agents access to certain data or RAG calls so they can grab real-time information and use that information to better respond. They can do project management tasks. They can do surveys. They can start to make phone calls. They can do all types of things. I didn't include it in this slide, but one of my favorite new examples is something that I call, that 11 Labs created. And I think I can actually do a quick demo of this. Let's see if this goes well. You know what happens when you do demos unexpectedly. So,
I'm Jonathan Turkey, the Happy Turkey for Thanksgiving. Ask me anything.
hey, Jonathan, what should I have for Thanksgiving dinner?
Well, that's a question that gets me groveling. Let's see, for a truly memorable Thanksgiving feast, I suggest you ditch the traditional turkey and opt for a delicious vegetarian centerpiece.
No.
How about a flavorful turkey roast? It's a plant-based alternative that's sure to impress your guests.
So that's Jonathan Turkey. That was we do like a show and tell at Thanksgiving, and so I made Jonathan Turkey for it. This uses 11 Labs. It's an assistant. You give it a system instruction set. I told him he's a turkey, so he doesn't want you to eat turkey. And it uses 11 Labs where you can pick any of the voices, and it becomes a conversational AI chatbot that you can easily deploy and communicate with. I'll tell you, this took less than 5 minutes to create. All right? But you could go further and start to give it your own data and RAG. So for example, I could give it a set of recipes that I wanted to use and other information. This is very similar to the things that you can start to do with Copilot Studio in creating these agents and these AI tools that are real time. Spicy? All right. So I wanted to save the last 10 minutes for questions, but I want to end with there's more that you can do if you just want to have fun. And I won't play this whole thing, but I want you to know in watching this video here that every aspect of this video was created using AI, and the only thing that I did is assemble this video together. You won't be able to forget this. I'm sorry. I won't play the whole thing. You can go find it if you want to watch it. Now, this uses Suno AI, which is an amazing tool. I'm just going to warn you, once you go to suno.ai, that might be the rest of your afternoon. All the music generated was created using that, lyrics and all. The videos are 4-second snippets that have been assembled together using a tool called Runway, which allows you to create AI video. And this was like on one of the lower end paid plans. And the initial video of the person giving the narration, the intro, that's a 11 Labs conversational voice given a script. And all the photos, I gave it my picture as a reference, like 26 photos, and those were all AI generated photos. So that I did not pose for that record cover. All right. But it gives you an idea of where we are now. You know, I figured we'd talk the business stuff, but also, you know, social media conference, the fun things that you can also start to do with all of the different tools that are there in terms of creating something that's original and that's interesting. All right? So I think that leaves us with about 10 minutes for questions, which is what I want it to be.
So if you have a link tree on your Instagram that has a question or something and someone answers it, can that Copilot Studio, the agent there, answer it automatically?
I don't know if it can work specifically with Linktree off the top of my head, but any tool that has some form of API, it is possible for you to connect it with Copilot Studio or some other AI tool.
Okay, thanks.
Any others?
When you were making the agent, you added the books as data. Does that book that you added then become part of the data that the entire ChatGPT uses? Have you loaded it into its metaphorical mind, you know?
This is a good question. So there is an option when you're using ChatGPT, the free or the paid version, that you can go in and say under settings, and it's on default, it will use any prompt or any information you give it to teach the model. You can toggle it off, and that will make sure that it doesn't, at least as far as OpenAI says is the case. Not all models provide this option, right? It's one of the conversations with DeepSeek, which is the fact that their servers are run in China, they're not in the US, and their privacy agreement says you can't turn these things off, so if you're using something like that, it's possible that it's being used to train. On the developer side, they tend to be, their terms of agreement definitely say that they will not use it for training, and they also have special accounts for business and enterprise that are very explicit that the data is not used for training.
I was just wondering, you know, you go on ChatGPT and you ask it an off-the-wall question, and it comes back with this data, all this data that come out of nothing, just out of a question. Where is that data derived from? And a lot of these things that rely, like we do on a daily basis, the data we've inputted throughout our first click off of a computer has been stored somewhere. So all that data we've already provided for AI. Why haven't, you know, we should be paid for our data we've already given it, because it can't come out, nothing from nothing leaves nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can't come out of nowhere. You know, and I understand the assistant, you're giving it everything that you need, you know, you're giving it everything that you want your assistant to know. But the one that we're dealing with now, and you know, the government's 30 to 40 years ahead of us. I mean, we got self-repairing metals already. Let's think about it. You know, I mean, I'm just saying, I love it. I think it's a great tool. But I'm just worried about the safeguarding. That's it. And a way to find where it derived from, and that's it. Thank you. You've done a great job. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. I got my response to that's a little complicated. I think there's no question that all these folks have gone out and grabbed all the data that they possibly can off the internet and used it with, regardless of whether you said yes or no. But I also feel that everything that we do and create is a derivative piece of work, no matter what. If you learn to play the piano, you learn how to play the piano by playing someone else's music, right? And so there's this derivative nature that is just part of how things happen. What's the thing that I think that makes everyone feel upset about AI, it's not that it's creating derivative work, it's that it's creating derivative work in 5 seconds, right? If it took it a year or 2 years, it'd be like, that's not a big deal. The funny thing about DeepSeek is right now they're saying that it's a distillation model. And a distillation model means that they trained it by using information from another AI model instead of going out and getting its own data. And OpenAI is a little upset about this. But what it essentially means is that they stole data from OpenAI, who stole data from us. So it's kind of like, is that a problem? There's also a secondary piece to this, which is that a lot of these AI companies feel like we are very close to have hit peak data from humans. That the speed that humans are creating new information and new data, it's too slow. And that in order for them to continue to train these models, they're going to need these models to start creating more data to feed the models because we can't do it fast enough. And so it's going to be interesting to see just how this changes. Yeah, I think there's one over here.
Hi, it's all very interesting. My question is, how are you referencing and accrediting? You're pulling information from books, other people's work. How are you giving credit to people when you're creating the chatbot?
So when we did AI in A minor, there was a guy who asked a question because we created this new work that was derivative from music from Mozart and from Philip Glass. And when we put it up and we played it, it said developed by, and it attributed like the development team that worked with me as the developers of this music. And one of the questions was, well, I mean, does Mozart get like a hit? Like, who is it attributed to? Who created this? Is it the model? And so we had developed by, and then we also attributed the model that helped create it. But it didn't attribute the original music that came in or the different things that were used to create it. I don't know if I am the person to answer this question, but I feel like at some point, when you talk about footnotes or referencing something, there is a level of that should happen. How that happens and to what extent is, I still think, something that's going to take a while to get to. It's also hard when there's so much information that possibly is being used to get to a singular response. And when we talk about some of these models that are reasoning models, it may think about something the way that you do. You read a book, but you might not attribute it to that book because you read it 5 years ago, and it just happens to be knowledge that's in your head that you can't say, hey, it's because of this thing. So I think it's complicated, but I think it also is important that we get to a place where we can say, how did we get to where we are? I'll add one other thing to that. The reasoning models have something that's called chain of thought. And chain of thought is this idea of showing your work in math. So when it gets to a reason or a response, it will show you the steps and how it got there. And in some cases with some of these, these reasoning models, you can go back and say, all right, you went and looked at this thing. You can do that in the developer tools too, to go back and say, you looked at this line in this book to get to your response in terms of, Austin being a Libra.
How should a business protect itself? I mean, will it record? I guess my thing is I want to make sure if you use it and if you're using
You don't want to get sued.
Right. And so you've got to keep accurate records on what you've used, right? So is that all built into the programming itself?
So depending on the model that you're using, the big companies, OpenAI, Microsoft, Anthropic, Amazon, they have essentially I'll call it a warranty that says that they will protect you if there is a lawsuit based on the data that was used to train the models that they provided to you. Now, they don't say what happens for the data that you use to further tune your model, right? And so if you did like I did and grabbed a book and fine-tuned the model and then there was a copyright issue because of that, that's on you. But if you're using your own proprietary data to feed that model and you also are using ChatGPT, anything that's part of ChatGPT that it uses to answer this question, they got you covered. I think this is the last one, because then we're at 9:35.
So I have a question about the Vision AI component. So one of the things I do is photography, and I uploaded a picture with no context. Like, I even changed the file name. I don't add metadata or anything to the files. And I said, hey, tell me about this picture. And it detailed, said, this is what it is, this is where it is, this is in the background. Like, how does it see?
So AI models for text are called large language models, right? And large language models, in a lot of ways, are like figuring out the next word. The models that are used for images are called diffusion models. So it's a different model in terms of how it works. So they're actually in two different places in the artificial intelligence tree of learning. A diffusion model, and the simplest way to describe it is that it blurs out parts of a picture and then unblurs it to try and understand all the different components of it, and then assigns meta tags or information to an image based on it. And so it's like taking all the different pieces of an image and converting it to words to say, like, this is a sky, this is a moon, this is this, when it does that diffusion process, so it can understand the elements of an image. And then it uses that to then recreate those images or those assets. If you think of like the name Stable Diffusion, it actually says diffusion in the name, which speaks to the type of model that's being used for image generation as well as understanding images. All right. So thank you. I'll be here all day. So I really appreciate the time. Thank you for having me.